Did you know that Hawaii is not legally part of the US and that the Hawaiian Kingdom is actually still a sovereign nation? Now you may be thinking, wait, but isn't Hawaii the 50th state of the US? While it may be politically recognized as a US state, based on the legal documentation of the overthrow and annexation of the Hawaiian government to the US, it appears that several violations of international law were made in the acquisition of Hawaii as a part of the US that actually constitute Hawaii as a sovereign nation being illegally occupied to this day. This is much different than the colonization of other parts of the world because Hawaii was internationally recognized as a sovereign state and held treaties with the world's biggest powers at the time, unlike the governments of nations that were acquired by these powers. In the past couple of decades, this matter has actually been acknowledged by the International Court of Justice. Now you may be wondering why nothing has been done about this. Well, right now the biggest problem is that no one outside or even inside Hawaii knows about this because the documentation of this knowledge was made inaccessible to the majority of people since the banning of the Hawaiian language and cultural practices in the early 1900s. Due to the denationalization of the Hawaiian people, our history has been lost for decades, and it's now our job to make this knowledge accessible to others. Within the next few minutes, I will be detailing the history of Hawaii and pieces of evidence that prove the illegality of the United States annexation of Hawaii, along with what you can do to help stop the occupation. So now, let's put some evidence behind these claims. Starting all the way back in the beginning of the 19th century, a turning point for the Hawaiian Kingdom, King Kamehameha I had just united the kingdoms of Hawaii into one overarching government system, centralizing and consolidating power much like that of other nation-states around the world. Just a decade later, the arrival of Western missionaries showed up in Hawaii, conveniently right after the abolishment of many of the ancient Hawaiian customs and laws known as the kapu system. Now, Hawaii already had a government system in place for many years, yet none of these rules were codified through an internationally recognized system. That is, until 1840. In 1840, the first written constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom was created. Now, often the narrative of this creation gives all credit to foreign influences. However, the creation of this constitution is heavily rooted in ancient Hawaiian values and customs, which show that while the creation of this written document seems to follow that of US and other Western powers, it's because the Hawaiian leaders saw the importance of protecting their kingdoms and establishing themselves on a worldwide stage, which would only be possible if they were able to communicate through the same way other international powers saw fit. So to do this, they hired William Richards to help them create the first written constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom. In the book No Mako Kamana, Liberating the Nation, Kamana Maikalani Beamer says that the sections of the 1893 laws that address natural resource divisions and land inheritance offer additional examples of how ʻali'i used law to codify existing indigenous structure. Some actual examples of this within the Hawaiian government were designations of certain grounds to the people, specifically Kilohe'e, which is the deep sea past the reef, and these were dedicated to the people because of the connection between the Maka'ainana and the Aina, which are the commoners in Hawaii, and their relationship to the land. This is something that wasn't previously seen in Western laws. So, as I mentioned, the Hawaiian leaders, the ʻali'i, were trying to establish themselves on a global scale. The first part of this was creating a codified legal system that was internationally recognized, but now they had to get internationally recognized by the actual powers. So, first they started with Britain, who were the first foreigners to really explore Hawaii and its people. While their relationship started off a bit unsteady with the whole Captain Cook fiasco, they soon developed a relationship through Captain Vancouver, who Kamehameha I became very close with. He even informally agreed to a treaty between the Hawaiian Kingdom and Britain to establish a form of protection from Britain for the Hawaiian Kingdom, which was the first of the Hawaiian Kingdom's international relations. After the death of King Kamehameha I, his son Liholiho, King Kamehameha II, visited Britain to confirm and formally get the agreement of the British leaders to protect Hawaii. Later, in the 1840s to 50s, they took this even a step further, and on November 28, 1843, Great Britain issued a formal joint declaration with France guaranteeing Hawaiian independence, and on the 19th of August in 1850, a treaty with the United States was also ratified. Now, what exactly happened during the 1890s that led to the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom government? Well, at the time, the children of the first missionaries in Hawaii were pretty well established. Many of them had actually made their way into the Hawaiian Kingdom's government and held pretty high positions in it. At the time, the sugar industry in Hawaii was also on a rise due to the treaty Hawaii had with America that allowed them to export sugar to the U.S. tariff-free. Now, eventually, this led to the formation of a group known as the Hawaiian League, who looked to either turn Hawaii into a republic or just fully annex Hawaii to the U.S. This group allied with the Honolulu Rifles and held King Kalakaua at gunpoint to sign a revised version of the 1964 Constitution, which essentially stripped away the power from the monarchy and the Aboriginal Hawaiian citizens. This constitution was known as the Bayonet Constitution. After this, many of the native Hawaiian people were upset about the unfair laws and advocated for equal rights. The Hawaiian Patriotic League, not to be confused with the Hawaiian League, started petitions for a new constitution and eventually allied with another group known as the Men and Women's League to start an island-wide anti-annexation petition called the Ku'e Petitions. At the same time, however, an annexation club was also being formed by people who held high positions in the government. Soon after, Queen Liliuokalani was put into office, and she drafted a new constitution that she wanted to replace the Bayonet Constitution that was previously signed. However, before this could be put into effect, a group known as the Committee of Safety was created with the agenda of annexation, and they created the provisional government. Within this group, they got confirmation from an American minister that said they would land American troops in Hawaii if necessary. And so, on January 17, 1893, the Committee of Safety invaded the government building, backed by American troops, where Queen Liliuokalani surrendered under the threat of invasion and war. There, a proclamation was read that basically got rid of the monarchy, deposed of the queen, and put a provisional government in charge. During this time, Queen Liliuokalani was imprisoned to her room, but she did write to President Grover Cleveland about the situation, and in response he commissioned an investigator to determine the events and legality of the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom. From this report, it was declared that Queen Liliuokalani was indeed the constitutional ruler of the Hawaiian Islands and that she should be restored to her rightful place. However, the president of the provisional government, when told by Grover Cleveland to step down and restore Queen Liliuokalani, said that we do not recognize the right of the President of the United States to interfere in our domestic affairs. Such right could be conferred upon him by the act of this governance, and by that alone, it could be acquired by conquest. So now that you know a brief overview of the history of Hawaii, we can bring it all together to show exactly why the annexation of the Hawaiian Islands to the U.S. was illegal. Okay, first of all, let's define annexation. As defined by Britannica, annexation is a formal act whereby a state proclaims its sovereignty over territory hitherto outside its domain. Unlike cession, whereby territory is given or sold through treaty, annexation is a unilateral act made effective by actual possession and legitimized by general recognition. Actually, the United Nations Department of Human Rights declares that any form of annexation itself is illegal because it uses force to take an independent country. Now, if you remember, the provisional government tried to create a treaty to cede over the Hawaiian government territory, but they were unsuccessful in doing so, and since Hawaii had established themselves internationally as an independent nation, this treaty would be needed to make the taking of the Hawaiian Islands legal. We actually see many similar situations of this around the world. One example that is actually happening right now is the illegal annexation of Crimea, though, since Crimea is not an independent nation, but rather part of one, their situation is a little different, though still similar in terms of illegality. One of the best examples of the situation that Hawaii is currently in is that of the illegal annexation and occupation of Kuwait. If you don't know the history of Kuwait, basically on July 23, 1990, Iraq moved thousands of troops into the border of Kuwait, and then on August 2nd, 1990, they attacked, and once they had gained control through force, they created the Provisional Government of Free Kuwait. As you can see, there are many similarities that arise between the invasion and occupation of Kuwait and Hawaii. But if you still don't believe me after all of this, Here's an actual memorandum from the United Nations Department of Human Rights stating that Hawaii is in fact in a state of illegal occupation and was illegally annexed by the U.S. Well, now that the evidence is there that Hawaii is still a sovereign nation under illegal occupation, you must be thinking, well, what next? Many people may believe that attempts to end illegal occupation and annexation of Hawaii may be futile. However, if we look at the history of the past few decades, we see that, in fact, the liberation of an occupied country is not impossible. As I mentioned earlier, the closest situation resembling that of the Hawaiian Kingdom was the illegal annexation of Kuwait, and as we know, they have since been liberated by the U.S. of all nations. So, what makes Hawaii's situation different from Kuwait? Why was the U.S. so quick to help out Kuwait when they have been involved in the same inhumane conquest themselves, and still have yet to take action on it? George W. Bush himself even said, "No peaceful international order is possible if larger states can devour their smaller neighbors." The thought of ending occupation may seem scary for many residents in Hawaii, but ending the occupation doesn't mean that we'll go back to the days of the kapu system and no electricity. Hawaii was well established before and can continue to establish itself further, or even if voted, could be ceded to the U.S. legally. So, while we are in the beginning stages of this timeline to end occupation, the best thing that you can do to help out is to do as I did and research Hawaii's history to share with others. I hope this video series gave you some insight on the situation and history that Hawaii is currently in, and I hope that you'll be able to share some information that you learned with others and get the word out about the illegal occupation. Thank you for watching.